I think a lot about the wind. The wind is a trickster. The wind will misinform you. The wind will push you around. The wind will sneak up on you when you don't expect it. And because of that, we need to be thinking about the wind and where it's coming from and where it's going and how it's going to affect us in our boats. As the wind changes direction, it's going to affect our boat in different ways, and that's what I want to talk about today. Right now, this boat is positioned so that the wind is coming straight at its nose. This is actually a really great opportunity for us. The boat is going to go nice and straight. It's going to track nice and true. It's a good indicator of how good our paddle stroke is. I've seen a lot of really good paddlers who just can't handle paddling into the wind. The wind will pick apart your stroke, and if you've got problems with it, if it isn't efficient, this is where it's going to show up. But in general, paddling into the wind is not too bad. Another thing that's not too bad is when the wind is coming from back here, behind the boat. The problem with wind coming from behind the boat, particularly long kayaks, is that the kayak tends to get a little squirrely. And as the boat is pushed a little bit in one direction or another, the wind grabs onto the hull on the side and pushes it more. And then as soon as the boat wants to get a little bit sideways, it grabs more hull, the wind grabs more hull, and the next thing you know, you're fighting to make the boat go straight. If you were to stop paddling completely in the wind, the boat is going to slowly turn flat to the wind. That's where it's grabbing the most wind, the side of the hull. And that, when we're sideways to the wind, is really the most difficult thing that we deal with. And so all the wind pushing in from the side, we've got the bow of the boat locked into the water because we're moving forward. The bow is forcing that water apart, and that applies a lot of pressure to the sides of the hull. The stern, which is being pulled through the water, has a lot less pressure applied to it. So because of that, more pressure in front, less pressure in back. If you get a lot of wind from the side, it's going to push the boat evenly, but because there's less pressure holding the stern is going to get pushed in the same direction of the wind. And that's going to force the bow into the wind. That's what we call weathercocking, and it's super common in kayaks. So what can we do about weathercocking? You can fix it easily and quickly by just sliding your paddle to one side or the other. If your paddle's a little bit longer on one side, it's going to add a little bit of a sweep turn on one side, and it's going to lessen the amount of power on the other side, so that the boat is going to want to turn a little bit with each stroke. Another thing that you can do is something that I do all the time, which is edge the boat into a little bit of a turn. And the nice thing about my kayak with those really hard chines is that I can hold an edge for a long period of time. It's super easy in my boat to hold an edge. It's a lot harder with a boat with rounded chines to hold an edge like that. If neither of those things are working, then it's time to put down a rudder or a skeg. Both rudder and skeg do the same thing. They lock the stern of the boat in to hold it into place. The nice thing about a rudder is it doesn't take up space in your stern compartment. The skeg has to be retracted into a skeg box, which is in the stern compartment. The other nice thing about a rudder is once it's down, you can then tweak the angle of your boat to the wind by applying a little pressure with either of your feet. Super efficient, super easy. When you put the skeg down, it's essentially locking in the stern the same way the bow is locked in. So it works really well, but you can put too much skeg down, and so you have to sort of play with the adjustability of that skeg. How much skeg do you want? How much bite do you want? So we need to get good at identifying wind speed and looking at all the things around us. How the trees on land are moving, how the water is affected, how the water is blowing, the wavelets, the texture on the surface of the water are all going to give us a good idea as to what the wind is doing. So while you can look at the waves to get an idea for what the wind is doing, don't rely solely on them. The single best way to figure out where the wind is coming from is to close your eyes and point your nose to the wind until you feel equal amounts of pressure on both ears. That is the best way to find the wind. Paddle in wind, get comfortable with it. Learn your comfort level with different wind speeds. Learn as the wind changes, how it changes the texture of the water and the surface of the water and the building of waves. Have fun, and I'll see you outside. Wait, hang on. Ugh. This is important. Can you believe all that I've gotta? Yeah, we'll get to that later. Okay, I want to make sure that you're thinking about wind speed in terms of knots, not miles per hour. Look, all of us in the United States deal with miles per hour. We drive cars, we think about how fast things are going. The weather report even reports winds in miles per hour. In a kayak, you need to be thinking about wind in terms of knots, and here's why. When we're paddling a kayak, we're thinking in terms of our speed in knots because charts are based on nautical miles. A nautical mile is 1 minute of latitude. So it makes it very easy to convert distances and speed and time to workable numbers. If we're paddling in knots, we need to be thinking about wind in knots so that we can convert that in our heads really well. So that you're saying, oh, it's a 20-mile-an-hour wind, but how does that affect me going 5 knots or 4 knots? Okay, that was all I wanted to say. Think in terms of knots.